All right, for those of you joining in over on YouTube, we're getting ready to go live here on TikTok. Just went live. Gonna take a little bit for people to join in. Um, and we're gonna be doing what we've been doing, talking news, politics, um, talking about everything, talking about what Donald Trump can and can't do going forward, how he's gonna do half of what he says, if he's gonna be able to accomplish anything. Um, and I know right now, like today, he went out into Truth Social. He was fuming about judges, and he wants Republicans to block any judicial appointments by the Democrats between now and Inauguration Day. But that's just not how that works. Joe Biden has every right to nominate anybody he chooses between now and January 20th, and it is up to the Senate to confirm those picks. Um, and at least until January 3rd, the Democrats control the Senate. So they can go ahead and, uh, confirm whoever Joe Biden wants between now and then. And they're going to try to get at least a few judges pushed through. For those of you joining in, we are talking news, politics, and going to be talking about, everything going on. Um, I know some people are worried about some of the cabinet picks that we've heard coming out of Donald Trump, and a bunch of them are not going to be getting through the Senate. They're just not going to happen. That's why Donald Trump wants the Senate to go on recess. He wants to be able to use recess appointments, things like that, to get his way, and we'll see if they allow it, if the Senate even goes on recess, but they really haven't been able to do much with recess appointments going all the way back to 2014. Um, the Senate doesn't like to give up the power to let the president just appoint whoever, which is what a recess appointment is. They want it. They like keeping their power to confirm, and typically what they do is when the Senate's going to be gone for an extended period, they keep one senator back. They have like a 30-second performance session where he says, okay, since everybody's here, I'm going to assume no one objects to us going home. Okay, with no objections, we're going home for 3 days. See you guys later. And it's all performances. Hey, TJ the plumber in the house, one of our moderators, or my only moderator actually. Um, and that's what they do. The Senate doesn't want to give up their appointment confirmations if they can help it. And it's kind of in a sticking point between the incoming Trump administration 2.0 and Senate Republicans, as some of them are on the fence, especially with as bad as Matt Gaetz is, with all of the negative around him. And it sounds like Donald Trump is really pushing for Matt Gaetz. Let's see. I'm in the yellow. What does that mean? Unstable connection. Let me see if I can fix it here. But like I know the Senate's got some questions and concerns about Matt Gaetz potentially being uh, the Attorney General, and they want to see that ethics report. So, um, with that, you know, Donald Trump's going to want to sidestep that because that ethics report is probably going to be pretty bad. And we've been hearing that it's going to be bad. That's why Matt Gaetz resigned from the House when he did. He resigned like the day before it was set to be released. He was trying to get around it being released. He doesn't want that to see the light of day. And, the Senate at least wants to see it. Now, some people think that means they're going to look at it and go, well, it's really not that bad. Do it in some kind of a private hearing and still rubber stamp Donald Trump's pick. But like 30 Senate Republicans have said, absolutely not. They are not going to approve Matt Gaetz. And this is going to lead to some kind of a standoff between the Trump administration and Congress. Now, I've said before, Congress doesn't need the president anymore. They don't need Donald Trump. He's got nothing more he can give Republicans at this point. Maybe he could sway some of the midterm votes, but highly unlikely, especially if his policies are as bad as what we're hearing. And beyond that, he can't run in 2028. So they don't need to appease him nearly as much as they would have prior to this election. They, helped him win so they could ride it on his coattails and have power in Congress. That's all they cared about. So we'll see what they do with some of these confirmation picks. But Donald Trump, if he doesn't get his way, he's going to be mad and he's going to be steamed. Apparently, he's trying to find other ways to get Matt Gaetz in. They're looking at ways at which he could try to use the adjournment power of the president, so where he could settle the dispute between both houses and say, yeah, Congress, you're gone for 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever, so they could actually be recessed and he could use appointments that way. And some people are thinking if he does that he would also then be able to use a law from the 90s that would allow him to carry his picks over even without Senate consent. But that's a lot, and I just don't think it would happen. That we have never had a president adjourn Congress. It has never happened in our, would it be 230 some years being under, I don't know why I keep freezing. I'm going to double check my connection here. Apparently it doesn't like my Wi-Fi network for some reason. Hopefully it comes out of it and fixes itself. But, we've been under the Constitution since 1787, and we've never had a president adjourn Congress. It's never happened. And even though it's in the Constitution, I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they do anything with it. Like, he may try, but that would ultimately get challenged in the courts. There we go. Hopefully this is fixing it. Maybe. No. Yeah, I don't know why it's really not liking my internet connection right now. Hopefully it improves here shortly. But yeah, we've never had a president actually adjourn Congress before. Even though it says they can do it in the Constitution, it has never happened. And there we go. Maybe it fixed itself. Let's see if that fixed it. But it's never been done. So if they tried to do it, and how we would try to do it, would ultimately end up getting challenged in court, and we'd have to go from there. It's all just a guessing game. But the Senate, if they can help it, I don't see them giving up their power of confirmations to President Trump. And if they do allow a recess appointment of some kind, they still either have to eventually confirm that person, or at the end of this Congress, which would be January 3rd of 2027, that Matt Gaetz would be out of a job. And let's see, still saying unstable. Now, like I keep saying, congressional Republicans know they have to get reelected. And if they have to get reelected, well, even if they don't, like if they allow a recess appointment and don't immediately say, hey, we don't confirm this guy, then uh, they have to, they have to take that back to their voters and say, yeah, we haven't done anything with that yet, and they have to somehow justify it. Let me see here. I'm gonna end my live for a minute. I'm gonna come right back, um, and see if I can fix this connection issue here. All right. For those of you watching over on YouTube, I'm having some sort of a connection issue. Don't know why it's being so bad, but um, let's see. All right, loading back in here. Oh, we're back started again. Looks like my connection's a little better. Hopefully that fixed it. As we wait for people to come back, we were really down on view count anyway because I was having connection issues. Um, so now we're waiting to see who all comes in. For those of you joining in, we are talking news, politics, talking about Supreme Court nominations, things like that, the potential fight getting pushed between the Senate and um, Donald Trump when he takes office, because they're not going to want to just allow him to take appoint anybody. There's already some concern about some of his nominations, and Donald Trump is stubborn, if nothing else. We know he's stubborn, and he likes to get his way. So we'll see what kind of happens. But remember, during his first term, he didn't get all of his nominees appointed, um, and he didn't get his way on a lot of things. So we'll see how Senate Republicans handle him this time. Ultimately, as I talked about just before I ended my last live and came back in because of connection issues, um, they don't need him anymore. And to handle that, um, and it's amazing, his supporters are some of the sorest winners we've ever seen. Um, you don't have mod power? Let me. There we go. Okay, now see if you got it, TJ. I I think I missed a button or something last time. Um, Still new to a lot of this live stuff. Um, awesome. Appreciate everything you do, TJ. Uh, but they're some of the sorest winners. They won and they're still mad. And I think part of it is they're mad because we're not, uh, behaving the way they did back in 2020. We're not, you know, screaming and ranting and raving and going off the deep end on the conspiracy theories, and we're not staging protests, and we're not going to storm the Capitol on January 6th and just be completely ridiculous. There's not 60 court cases trying to overturn this election. None of it. And I think that's part of why MAGA is so upset about him winning. Is they know they acted like fools the last time. And since we're not doing that, it makes their behavior look even worse. I think the other half of it is now they know they have to uphold their end of the bargain. They got what they wanted. Republicans have both houses of Congress and the presidency. And we were told all of these things Donald Trump wants to do are going to fix the economy and make everything better and make America great again. Well, let's see, what actually happens. I don't think it will actually do anything. Yeah, look at his brilliant cabinet. You know, you got um, uh, handle it. Yeah. Oh, you got somebody like RFK Jr. in as Health and Human Services, somebody who's known to be anti-vax and everything else. You know, and they want to cut out the FBI background checks, and um, they want to go with private companies to do the background check and do uh, go around the FBI. You know, that's ridiculous. FBI's got some of the best resources available to do those background checks with counterterrorism, counterintelligence, all those kind of things. And prior to Donald Trump, we never questioned the FBI. Not really. Not as a whole. Not when it came to doing background checks and vetting presidential nominees and any of that. Didn't happen. But Donald Trump put the doubt in there because why? They investigated him for committing crimes. And he doesn't like, uh, the fact that they investigated him for committing crimes. Leward says, yeah, like Trump said, the poorly educated people voted for me. He loves the poorly educated. Exactly. And he says that to their face and they cheer. And they don't realize it's him actually insulting them. He can tell them whatever he wants, and a lot of them will believe whatever he says until it bites them in the ass. What am I wrong about? Oh, TJ got him. Yeah. It's. He says it to their face. He says, I love the poorly educated, to cheers. Yeah, you're a little quicker than me there, TJ. Thank you. Um, but he says that. He says, I love the poorly educated. He will tell them how something works and tells them to not believe experts in the field of how that works, like economists. You've got the majority of economists are saying tariffs are going to raise prices. Corporations are saying these tariffs will raise prices. And Trump says, it's not going to raise prices. You don't pay that. And they believe him. It's amazing how he can say almost anything and they cheer for him. Freezing again? Well, I got my internet thing figured out, so all MAGA are starting to ask questions now after giving him power. Yeah, I've heard about that. They're starting to ask, what's a tariff? What's the Affordable Care Act? Um, all sorts of things like that. They're finally asking what these things are after they voted for him. Alvin Bragg gave up on Trump. Yeah, I heard they agreed to push back the sentencing. And now they haven't agreed to dismiss the charges. Oh, we got another one. Got a couple of them. Yeah, they're they're some of the sorest losers, or sorest winners, I mean. They won, and they're not happy because we're not crying about it. We're talking about what can happen next. We're talking about what we can do next, what's going to happen going forward. And we're not ranting, raving, and, rioting like they were. We're in for 4 years of not a lot getting accomplished, realistically. Because Senate politicians, or congressional politicians, especially congressional Republicans, um, you know, congressional politicians, specifically congressional Republicans, uh, don't need Donald Trump anymore. What can he bring them? Seriously, what can he bring them now at this point? He can't run for another term, and he even though they won all three, both chambers of Congress and the presidency, they don't have supermajorities. They're barely sitting better than they were, you know, in Congress here the last 4 years. So what can what does he bring them? He was supposed to bring them. His endorsements didn't amount to a red wave in 2022 in the midterms at all. They were supposed to take the House by 30, 40 seats. They got five. And they may have less than a 5 seat margin, you know, starting on January 3rd. Haven't seen the final total. Last I knew it was like 218, 219 Republicans. They need 218 to be in charge. They are going to be struggling to get anything passed and get anything done. Yeah, I mean, I just don't see how they get anything passed because they could barely pass anything in the last 2 years out of the House. Nothing of substance. They're going to need Democrats to pass almost anything. Yeah, Dr. Oz to lead Medicare. All that's going to mean is slashing a whole bunch of money to Medicare, and your retirees who need the Medicare are going to be pissed. If they do half of what they want to do, they are going to be cutting out a big chunk of their voting base from ever voting Republican again. I know several people who had been lifelong Republicans had voted for Kamala Harris based solely on the idea of keeping their Medicare and their Social Security. Oh, there will be elections, Terry. Um, the only way there's not is if they pass a constitutional amendment changing how our government works entirely. They don't have the votes for that. They would need 67 senators. They don't have it. They would need like 325, 350 members of the House. They don't have it. And they would need 38 states to agree. They also don't have Republican majorities in 38 states. There will be elections. There, we have held elections every 2 years. Um, you know, through everything. We held elections every 2 years all the way through World War II. Made it happen. We did it during the Civil War. We made it happen. There will be elections. He can't do what he wants, not entirely. Some of those things, even congressional Republicans will step up and block. But like I said, they don't have the numbers to do things like uh, ending elections. Well, Joey says they're not taking uh, Social Security or insurance from us, but they want to. They want to end the Affordable Care Act, which a lot of people get their insurance under. They want to make major cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. And they're going to try. They have been against the Affordable Care Act since it passed under Obama. I remember the pre-existing conditions when insurance could deny you or charge you more or whatever. And if they do away with the Affordable Care Act, like they were talking about, it's going to come back where they can end up charging you more because you have, um, pre-existing conditions. Mostly tax cuts for billionaires. That's what Elon and Trump are working on. Medicaid funds your public hospitals. Remember that as they close in poor regions. Yeah, that's going to happen. Unfortunately, when they start cutting Medicaid, you might see some of that. They're also going to start limiting what can be covered, who gets coverage, funding, etc. They've also talked about putting in work requirements and job requirements, even though it's been proven those things don't actually help. Same with cutting out, you know, food assistance benefits. They want to limit what can be bought, how much people can get when it's already not nearly enough to barely survive on food stamps. The numbers don't work out. Um, they want to cut a lot of that. They call them entitlements because they think the people that are on those programs are just lazy and could be doing more to help themselves. But the problem with our government assistance programs, one of the problems, is it's an all or nothing system. Either you qualify or you don't, and the minute you go over the income thresholds, you get nothing, even if it's by just a little bit. It is very hard to keep that. I had people who have worked for me, decent employees, who would sit there and they would do the math when they knew they had evaluations coming up, when they had to provide pay stubs, and they would want to make sure their income was low enough that they still qualified. Cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid would hurt the pharmaceutical and doctors as well. Oh yeah, it would too. It would. It would hurt. It would hurt the entire industry. I, ultimately, I think we need to eventually move to something similar to a Medicare for all or a universal health care system. Everybody should be able to just go to the doctor and get coverage, and be covered. They shouldn't have to worry about, do I have to get it through the Affordable Care Act exchanges, or did I qualify for Medicaid, or any of that. I know people who are stuck in jobs they absolutely hate because they refuse to switch jobs. No, I took a drink. But they refuse to switch jobs just because they've got their insurance. They don't want to give up their insurance, or they've already got something pre-approved through their insurance to do, and they don't want to wait, longer to deal with it. I know one guy who was all set to have an insulin pump put in, and then ended up he got kicked off his wife's insurance through their job because they ended up divorcing while he was in the middle of that process, and it set him back several years. Your job shouldn't be the only reason you have insurance. And a lot of us, that's one of the things you look at when you get hired. When do you get your insurance? When does it kick in, etc.? Just think of all the immigrants that paid taxes and Social Security. Exactly. I read a number somewhere there. They estimate, it's all of the undocumented immigrants in this country pay something like $96 billion a year in income tax and Social Security combined that they will never see. Lisa says Medicaid pays for nursing homes. Exactly. Medicaid pays for nursing homes, but there's also, that was one of the things I was excited about with Kamala Harris's policy. She wanted to do more home care, so maybe you had somebody who didn't quite need a nursing home, but having Medicare pay for a home aid, and they could stay in their house, and then they wouldn't have to sell their house to pay their nursing home bill. Countries will retaliate with tariffs against the U.S., and that will mean layoffs and loss of jobs. Yeah, we went through this his first round with his limited tariffs against China. Here in Iowa, we had crops that were rotting in the field because I think it was soybeans. They weren't getting bought, and China went to other countries and bought them there. Retired parents will have to live with their kids and live off them working. Exactly. Yeah, there'll be another bailout for farmers. Yeah, I was kind of pissed at my Senator Chuck Grassley comes out after the election on a conference call with reporters here in Iowa and says, well, a trade war would be bad for farmers. Well, of course you come out after the election saying if we get into a tariff war, it's going to be bad. Where were you before the election? Why wasn't he saying this? But no, because he's a Republican, he didn't say it. Yeah. Chuck, I'm older than chocolate chip cookies, Grassley. I comment that every time because he's 5 years older than the first recorded printing of the chocolate chip cookie recipe. He's ridiculous. He's 91. He will be 95 when he's up for re-election, and he has filed the paperwork to run again. Why? Why is he still running? Other than the fact that he knows with his name on the ballot, there's a bunch of people who will go in that ballot box in the voter booth and they will put the check next to his name just because his name's there, because they recognize it. Jacqueline says, I want to hear MAGA voters take responsibility for the next 4 years. Yeah, they won't. Yeah, they like to tell you that the tariffs are going to bring manufacturing back to the United States, but No, it won't. Time Traveler asks, in 2 years, what are the chances of Congress flipping? Um, I think pretty good. And if things go half as bad as we're projecting they could be, there is a good chance that Democrats flip the House, take the Senate. Democrats always had an uphill battle going into the Senate race in 2024. There were 34 seats up for grabs because they only elect a third of the Senate every 2 years. And Republicans were only defending 9 of those 34 seats. They had an easier time to flip more seats than the Democrats did. The next run around, it's going to be a lot closer. Working class needs to unite, stop fighting amongst each other. Yeah. Um, and I think if the Democrats come around and they bring forward something like a New Deal, like what Roosevelt did back in the 1930s, they could end up having power for a long time. And they could reignite the working class voter base. Same with unions. Donald Trump's going to do everything he can to bust unions, especially as long as he's got Elon in his ear. They hate unions. They hate the idea of a union. They don't want the working class uniting and arguing and pushing for benefits. But most of the benefits we have today, we have gotten because of unions. The 40-hour work week, earned through unions. The paid holidays and things like that, unions. Our campaign should only be 6 months, not 2 years. I mean, the idea of a shorter campaign, maybe, but we thought that was going to work in Kamala Harris's favor, and that seemed to backfire, so I don't know. Take it one step further and organize an intelligent general strike? Maybe, but a lot of places in a lot of states where they don't have, if you're not union and you don't have any protections, they could fire you for attempting it. A lot of the states, they like to call it right to work. Iowa's one of them where they can fire you for anything. Like here in Iowa, part of it is not only can they fire you for any reason, but even if you work in a union place, you don't have to they can't force you to join the union the way I understand it. Like you can still opt out, work there, and not have any of the protections of the union. Like they can't force you to become part of the union to work there, the way I understand it. And a lot of states have done that to weaken unions and make it very weak because they don't like unions. Yeah, they came up with the right to work mess to weaken unions because they know united we have more power. When you see some of these places, look at what UPS struck over the summer, and some other places were going with them. In and out in what? Wasn't it like a week or two? Yeah, right to work states no forced union enrollment. Yeah. Yeah, my company fired a guy. Manti says my company fired a guy who just mentioned a union. Yeah, some places will do that. I know one company I worked for, and I was there for a long time. I don't know if they actually would do it, but the one of the things they was always talked about by upper management was they would close the location and they would come up with a reason, even if it was profitable, before they allowed a union to come in. They would make an excuse to close a location and terminate everybody if they even suspected unions were coming in. Well, thank you for the gifts and the likes. Um, but we're going to need unions now. You're probably going to see an uptick in unions at this point. Um, as we build up a coalition going forward, to offset some of what's going on. I know a lot of people are excited about this no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. Well, the reason they pushed for no taxes on tips, it wasn't for people like us and your local waitress or waiter down at your favorite food joint. Remember, the Supreme Court ruled that if you give somebody a tip after the fact, it's not a bribe if things went your way. That's a tip. So they want to reclassify a bunch of the big money at the top. Instead of giving it a bonus, it's a gratuity. It's a tip. So then the CEOs get these big multi-million-dollar bonuses called tips now, and that's all tax-free. That's what they're wanting to do. Jacqueline says, have you noticed states weakening child labor laws? Yeah, I have. Iowa was one of them. And they were told, and they were sued by the DOJ or the Department of Labor because of it. Because they said you still got to follow federal labor laws. But they lowered the working age in Iowa to 12 with a lot of the restrictions limited in anticipation of something changing at the federal level and the federal laws and the federal restrictions going away so they could put younger people back to work. Yeah, I think it was 12 in certain occupations. And they wanted to lift a lot of the restrictions like sweatshop for children working dangerous jobs. Yep. Like they wanted to lift some of the factory restrictions, things like that for people under 18. Yeah, they did it under the guise of COVID. But they still got turned around and they were told, hey, you still got to follow state labor or federal labor laws. And there were businesses here in Iowa that were, mom and pop shops in different locations that weren't following the federal labor laws when it came to what hours and time frames minors can work, and they were getting hit with hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and going, well, our state law is this. We can't afford to pay these fines. We were following the law because Iowa state law was different than federal, and the state politicians weren't making sure that everybody knew they still had to follow the federal law. It was ridiculous. And they left small businesses on the hook. Makes you wonder if they plan to send kids to work the jobs migrants do. Could be. They're going to need to make up that workforce somewhere. That's why I think there's going to be, I hope the Democrats come out with something like a second New Deal. They're going to have to come up with and probably replace a bunch of the fair labor laws and things like that, if they go away. I'm actually wondering if they're not going to come out and say, as far as like the migrants and stuff, well, we got all these great things in the works. We're going to get to work and get it all done. Not actually do anything, just say they're doing something, and come out and say in like 6 weeks later, well, our efforts were great. We got rid of all of the criminal migrants and stuff, all the criminal immigrants. Look at what a great job we did. And people will look around, not see them committing crimes and go, oh yeah, you must have. I think there's going to be at least some smoke and mirrors coming out of this incoming administration. They're going to tell you they did something and not actually fix a lot. That's why, I'm going to keep coming on here, going live, um, making videos, etc., calling them out on their bullshit, because we have to call them out and try to keep them honest and make sure people are aware of what they're actually trying to do. You're already seeing some pushback against mainstream media. I haven't watched mainstream media in a long time, and I will go to other sources, um, and try to figure out what did the mainstream media say, but I won't actually go to them uh, at all. I think they've been working against us for a while. It's like a foreign adversary wrote Trump's agenda. Shocker. Yeah, kind of. Actually, I think if you gave them the ability to, if to write this script and to say what he was going to say and to do what he was going to do, etc., I don't think they would have come up with something nearly this bad. And he's bullheaded and he's stuck on his picks. It sounds like he really wants to get like Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. Will you watch a little politics on YouTube but not much? You'd rather listen to people on TikTok. Yeah. I don't go to mainstream news sources, not really. If I can find it being covered anywhere else, I go there first. Sometimes I will go to like a main source, uh, trying to back up what I hear somebody else talking about if I can't confirm it anywhere. But they told us for 2 years it was neck and neck and it was a horse race, and it never should have been a horse race. If they would have covered Donald Trump the way he should have been covered, as the joke he is and how bad his policies are, and they would have focused on all of it as well as they could, the results would have been way different. Marcia says, I'm not happy with the results and I get scared. My son married to an illegal spouse. Yeah, but I know right now there are things in place they can do to help. Try to get, and I don't know what all those things are. I get worried about all of it too. You think you should listen to all sources? Only way to dispute misinformation. That's not uh, a, a bad point. Problem is when you have there are some sides you end up listening to. You can just tell they're not actually spouting the truth. No. RFK definitely will not be helping us. Not excited about the idea of RFK as head of Health and Human Services. You got a guy who's ardently anti-vax. He's got some weird ideas about health, and he's not going to be a good pick. I don't think he gets through the Senate. Your son's husband is going to look into it now after my kid got on him. Yeah, probably a good idea. See what they can do about getting through the any sort of process there. I know there are some channels here on TikTok that deal with it. I can't think of their names off the top of my head. That they have options there. When your primary news source states in court they are entertainment rather than news. Exactly. Obama considered RFK in 2008. Yeah, but a lot has changed between 2008 and now. RFK Jr. has changed a lot, and he's gotten a lot nuttier. Any idea where Vance has been? Um, I don't think. I don't think Vance is going to be seen much. He is going to be left out on his own. They are not going to feature Vance hardly at all. You're not going to hear from Vance. Um, he's going to be in the Senate, and because he's not going to be there to break hardly any ties. You're not going to hear much about Vance for at least the next 2 years, unless something happens and they remove Trump. Either because Trump has a health issue and he removes himself because of his health issue, which I don't think that would ever happen unless it was extremely serious. Because he wouldn't let. It's an ego thing with Donald Trump. He wouldn't want you to think he was sick at all. Vance could maybe try to use the 25th Amendment and remove him. And that's entirely possible. That he uses the 25th Amendment to remove Trump. But see, Donald Trump was going to want to keep Vance as far away from him as possible so that he can't see how bad he's actually getting. And I said the other night on a live, it's entirely possible that if Donald Trump goes too far off the deep end and things get bad enough, that the House may have no choice, a Republican House may have no choice but to remove Donald Trump, and they could potentially convict him in the Senate just because they have to save face and hope they can get reelected. J.D. Vance worse than Trump? Yeah, he is. Thing about J.D. Vance, though, is if something happens, like if the House ends up having to impeach Trump because he goes way over the line, and we got another one, TJ. And if Trump goes so far over the line, the House ends up having to impeach Trump, and they end up removing him. Thanks, TJ. If Trump ends up getting removed by the House and the Senate, Vance will be walking a very tight rope. He'll be scared as hell, and he may not run. Mike Johnson can be dangerous. Musk will be running the show, slash and burn, pocket the cash. Maybe. Problem is, it sounds like Donald Trump is already getting irritated with Elon. Elon and Trump have similar personalities. They both like being the center of attention. They both think they're the smartest man in the room. They will butt heads before long, and ultimately, it will be Trump who will get rid of Musk. Trump could get us into World War III. World on Fire asks, so with Linda McMahon now in charge of education, does that mean cage matches during detention? Maybe. Again, that's another pick. I don't know if Linda McMahon gets through the Senate. It's such a weird pick. I don't know where being a CEO of an entertainment company gets you any sort of credibility for the Department of Education. Still better than Boebert. I actually thought Boebert was going to get beat because her competition was out fundraising 6-1. Thanks, TJ. Now that we actually got it figured out and you actually have moderator power, man, working smooth. the whole World War III thing, it's possible, especially if Ukraine falls. I think that's why Biden is allowing them to use missiles deeper into Russia, trying to force Russia's hand to end it now before Trump becomes president. MAGAs fuck around and find out. Yeah, they're in the find out stage. The number of people who have been looking up, is Obamacare the Affordable Care Act, and how do I change my vote, and what is a tariff? They're looking it up now after they cast their vote. As a different creator called it, this is like failing the open book test and then studying. It is too late. They, oh, well, thank you, Marsha. Marsha says I do great on TikTok. I appreciate that. Just glad somebody's getting some value out of what I do. Try to look at things and analyze and break it down to make it make sense. And try to, once I got past the initial shock of Trump winning and kind of worked through the grief of what could have been, now it's looking at what could happen. Old Cutter says, will the Constitution stop the autocrat? Oh, yeah. Constitution's going to hold. No, Constitution will hold. It's they don't have the votes to change the things they need to change. Now, if they would have gotten 67 votes in the Senate, or 67 senators, if they would have made it to 325, 350 in the House, they might have had a chance of at least attempting to change some of the Constitution. But they also don't have nearly enough state legislatures around the country to do it. They just don't have the votes to alter the Constitution the way they need to. And Donald Trump's going to have the fewest number of open judge positions available to any incoming president in a long time. Biden is pushing through as many nominations as he can between now and January 3rd. And even some of the most egregious shit, I don't even think this Supreme Court would be willing to side with him on, just because they know they have to even though they can't get reelected, they have to deal with what happens when Democrats get power again, and they don't want the spotlight on the Supreme Court. Lots of grief. I'm on new meds with stress. Yeah, I get that. Ronald says, I want to say everyone who voted for blue, thank you, Patriots. Exactly. And we're going to come through this. Yes, Eugene. Trump did nominate Linda McMahon as Education Secretary. Can they actually get appointed? They can get appointed. Can they get through? It depends. They have 54 votes 54 seats in the Senate, and they don't have a very big margin. They had 52 seats the last time he was president, and they didn't get all of his picks through. I just don't think the Senate he will get some of his picks through. I don't think he's going to get all of them. No, we won't become a fascist country. They may try. Tony Michaels has been saying that for a long time. He keeps saying it's the intersection of WrestleMania and real life. But the thing is, the Senate, I don't think they're going to go on recess and allow him recess appointments, because the senators No, they have to go back to their constituents, back to their states, and try to get reelected in 2 years. A third of the Senate does. And then if they allow recess appointments and then don't come back and vote against some of these really bad picks, they have to live with that, and they have to justify it to their voters. And that's why I think they're going to block some of it. Old Cutter says even if Jesus ran, the maggots would still not vote for him. Exactly. Mentioning Hulk Hogan, what's interesting is if you listen to his theme music, he fights for the rights of every man. Yeah, that is not what Hulk Hogan and Donald Trump stand for anymore. When you hurt my friends, then you hurt my pride. He is the exact opposite. His theme is the exact opposite of everything they stand for. He did have people in positions without being confirmed as acting positions, but I still don't think they're going to get a bunch of these through. I think Matt Gaetz is done in politics. Matt Gaetz will probably be done. I don't think he's going to be Attorney General. Not worried about him. Not worried about RFK Jr. Pete Hegseth probably not going to get through either. And as far as the House, they have such a thin majority. They can't agree on anything. Did anyone in the history of the U.S. have a higher turnover? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there was anybody that had more cabinet positions turned over than Trump, especially on a one-term president. Marsha asks if I'm worried. No. I'm not worried. Because I believe in the guardrails of our democracy. You've got Senate confirmations. That the Senate's got to deal with it. They got such a thin majority in the House, they're going to be fighting amongst themselves to get anything passed. They're not going to be able to get much done. And they know they have to get reelected. So there's going to be some guardrails there. Not to mention we still have the courts. And the courts are going to block some of the worst of it, some of the unconstitutional shit. They don't have the votes to change the Constitution. And even that, it takes a long time. Like, it took what was Prohibition, like 3 years? Lots of blackmail going on. Notice when McConnell tried to speak up, info was leaked on his wife. Yeah. Your impression's logical. What are my credentials? I mean, I just look at things the way, I've studied politics, I study history, and I've studied the Constitution. I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm just saying what I see. So everything will have to pass with Democratic support. Because of the filibuster, a lot of it will. And it's one of those things. The filibuster is a tool that both sides love and both sides hate. When they're in the majority, they hate the filibuster. When they're in the minority, they love the filibuster. The filibuster is this rule that says you have to have 60 votes to get past the talking stage to actually bring a bill up for a vote in the Senate. And then you can pass it with a simple majority after that, but you got to get past 60 votes to get past the filibuster. Well, what happens is when one party or the other is in the minority, they block everything they don't like and just filibuster it all, never allow it to come up for a full vote on yes or no, will it pass, and they block everything. Both sides do it. The minority party always loves the filibuster. The majority party hates it when they're in the majority. When they go back to the minority, they love the filibuster. It's one of the reasons why it's so hard to get it to go away. GOP owns all branches of government. They do. But again, you got the filibuster. Unless they decide to nuke the filibuster completely, again, not with the filibuster. I mean, let's see. They'll have the muscle to pass some things, but they have Trump won't be effective at all. Not at all. He wasn't effective last time. They barely passed anything his first time around. The only thing they really got done was tax cuts to the wealthy, which they're going to try to do again. Another big round of tax cuts to wealthy people, paid for on the backs of people like us. Everyday people who are going to face the brunt of it. Is even politics side in the Senate on a law to pass? What do you mean? Yeah, it's going to be passed on the back of his supporters. And then he'll somehow convince them that it was a great thing. They believe trickle-down economics works, and it hasn't worked for 40 years. This idea that, they have 54 in the Senate. They need 60 to get around the filibuster. Yep, so they have 54 senators, but they have to get around the filibuster at 60. Now, they could vote to nuke the filibuster and get rid of it completely. They would have the votes for that. They would have the numbers. I don't know if they have enough people on board for it. Problem is, at some point, they're not going to be in the majority, and Democrats will have the majority again, eventually. And no, Republicans have 54, Democrats have 46. But eventually, Democrats are going to have control of the Senate again. And they don't want... if they get rid of the filibuster, at some point Democrats have control, and they will be able to pass everything they want, and Republicans won't be able to stop them, which is why they won't get rid of the filibuster. They know at some point... I'm going to decline. At some point, though, they are going to end up back in the minority. Now, looking at history, I keep looking back at the stock market crash of 29, which led to the Great Depression. Well, stock market crashed, which led to tariffs, which led to the Depression, and a whole bunch of bank closures. We had like 20 years afterward of Democratic control in the presidency and Congress because of how bad they handled the Great Depression. If it's potentially that bad, Republicans could be in for a very long time before they ever have power again. Ashley says, what will be interesting or maddening will be to see how many of the rhinos lay down for MAGA. I don't think there'll be that many. Because again, they have to get reelected. Some of them will on some things that align with their with what they want to do, but they have to get reelected. They can't pass a bunch of egregious stuff. Yeah, they can't pass all of them through the Senate without Democratic support because they can't get around that filibuster. Now, if they get rid of the filibuster, then they wouldn't need Democrats at all. But again, they're not going to do that because they know that eventually they'll be in the minority. Jacqueline says Republicans eliminated the filibuster for SCOTUS. Yeah, they did. Can they get rid of it can they do it because of Trump? They could. They could get rid of the filibuster because of Trump. But I don't see how or why they would, because again, they will eventually be in the minority party. No, Trump can't do it on his own. It is a Senate rules thing. The senators have to pass it. We both have the same idea, TJ. So who controls the Senate now? Right now, Democrats control the Senate till January 3rd. Afterward, Republicans will have the Senate from January 3rd till January 3rd of 2027, depending on how the midterms turn out. And John Thune will be Senate Majority Leader for the Republicans. And he's not a big Trump fan. He was one of the ones backed by Mitch McConnell. And that was one of the first tests of this Republican Congress, where they were, Donald Trump wanted somebody like Rick Scott, who was going to cave and agree to recess appointments and be under his thumb. And they held a secret private vote and voted in John Thune instead as Senate Majority Leader. So he doesn't have a majority leader in the Senate that's going to be 100% friendly, which is a good thing, again, for the Democratic side. So the laws for immigrants might not go too far, but the ones to close the border, maybe. Yeah, exactly. I think they do try to close the border, but if they try to do some kind of sweeping immigration thing, like the mass deportations, that'll get challenged in court. If they try to even if Congress somehow passes something for like mass denaturalization, again, that would get challenged and tied up in court. I just don't see any way the courts back that play. Donald Trump has said he wants to sign an executive order changing how birthright citizenship works. Well, that's not a thing, because birthright citizenship is part of the 14th Amendment, and you can't change an amendment with an executive order. You need another amendment. Wouldn't stopping the dissemination of classified information be considered a core power? I would think so. I would think that would be considered a base power of the presidency. If you're referring to that as part of the immunity ruling, I'm guessing. I mean, I've got a couple degrees, but I've only taken a few speech classes. I hated speech classes. There were 1.3 million that were ordered to go home and are still here. They will go with the felons. Um, the thing about that is the immigration thing is a slow process. Part of the reason they're still here is because a lot of times they just don't have countries to take them. Biden might be able to. Problem is, it's never been done where because normally the DOJ and the presidency are two separate entire entities, and Biden's old school. He operates like politics did in the 70s. I'm not a teacher. I was told at one point I should be, though. I know several people in my graduating class that got through history and government because they asked me because they couldn't understand it the way the teacher explained it. Um, yeah, maybe. I'd have to go back and actually get a teaching degree, though. Although if I taught government and history, it would be better than having some coaches teach it. Because I try to make sure they actually understand how government functions. Because a lot of people don't like civics and they don't like government because, especially with politics, because, they don't think it actually helps. Or like they don't see the value in it. They don't understand how it works. Let's see. TJ says he used to teach plumbing. It's overrated. Um, okay, I get that, TJ. I appreciate the follow. How much the military will say no? Um, will say no to Trump. Hard to say. Pentagon's already said they will follow any lawful order, and that is going to be the rub. Wouldn't deporting millions of people be inhumane and a crime against humanity? You would think. You would think. And there's a lot to it, that because not only do you have to have as part of the deportation thing, the country you're sending them to has to be willing to accept those people too. You can't just throw them on a plane and send them there. There's a lot of international relations involved in deporting people. Obama deported 3 million. Nobody said anything about it, or were they upset? Um, wasn't it 3 million though over 8 years? I know that's seems like an expensive way to get rid of Melania. I mean, that's the thing. Some people think she's going to be end up filing for divorce from him at some point. That her not saying she's not moving into the White House again is her soft launching that divorce option. And maybe that could be, he would be the first president to get divorced while in office. That'd be another first for him. I mean, presidents deport people all the time. It's not a unheard of thing. And a lot of, like TJ says, ICE has border encounters that lead to deportations every year. That's the difference. A lot of the ones that you're talking about with Obama and Biden were people that they actually apprehended in the process of coming across the border. that end up getting deported. Biden or Trump is talking about just going into workplaces, churches, schools, etc., rounding up people that are suspected of being here illegally, and he wants to get them out. Sounds like without even court appearances or anything, and just you're gone. Biden and Obama, they had court hearings, etc. Like there's still ways. They still have potential to stay even if they get arrested by ICE. They are still afforded some amount of due process. Yeah, he can't really do it on day one because of it would have to go through Congress because they need budget money. That's a big chunk of it. A lot of what he needs to do is got to go through Congress because there's not money there for it. Where is he going to send them to? Most of them decline to show where they come from. That's another, like I was saying, that's another part of it. There has to be a country willing to take them. You can't just, deporting people is in part international relations. They have to, they have to have a country willing to take the people. You can't just put them on a plane and send them. It doesn't quite work that way. At one point he was talking about, because he doesn't understand where they come from, as they were talking about the legal Haitian immigrants in Springfield and that whole debacle about the made-up story of them eating pets, he was talking about deporting Haitian immigrants to Venezuela. Well, Venezuela wouldn't take them. They're not Venezuelan. Like, you can't just do that. You can't just put them on a plane and ship them to whatever country you want. They might try, but that doesn't really work. And then you end up in a humanitarian crisis, and then you got the rest of the world, trying to put pressure on us. Well, no, unless you're Greg Abbott, yeah, TJ, but Greg Abbott put them on buses and planes and stuff and sent them to other states. He kept them in the United States. He wants to try. He wants to try to deport people that have lived here. He wants to try to do away with birthright citizenship. But again, you can't get rid of that with an executive order. Executive orders can't overrule an amendment. And the 14th Amendment clearly says anyone born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction are American citizens. You can't get rid of that with an executive order. There would have to be a case that would go all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would have to decide to change precedent going back to when the 14th Amendment was passed and say that means something different than what we've known it to mean for 170 years. The only people he could attempt are those who are known as seeking asylum. But that would still require the courts, because through international treaties, we are legally obligated to do certain things with people that are seeking asylum. And that was one of the things Kamala Harris wanted to push through, is she wanted more money for the border, to have more money to do these court cases, because people show up for asylum and then it takes years and sometimes decades to get their court case all the way through till there's finally a decision. And they wanted to, speed that up so they could get a decision in months. How is this country going to feed itself if Trump gets rid of the workforce that's so many depend on? No idea. No idea. And, I can't speak for all farmers. I can't speak for all farmers here in Iowa, etc. But I do know some farmers here in Iowa do rely on migrant workers to come up and work the fields in the summer and help out and do things Same with, you know, a lot of places, especially in places where you have like more of your orchards and things like that. Without those people doing that for the wage they are willing to work, it is going to cost a ridiculous amount more for those products. Nothing's going to happen to those workers. They've got their green cards. That's the problem. He wants to get rid of some of them too. If they get their way, they would all be gone. Now, a lot of that was going to require Congress, and it's just not going to get through Congress, or the courts are going to block a bunch of it because of varying constitutional issues. But doesn't mean they're not going to try. He wants to get rid of everyone who is not a natural born citizen. He wants to get rid of some of them too. He wants to reframe the idea of birthright citizenship to where you only get birthright citizenship. Not only do you have to be born in the United States, but you have to be born to a citizen parent. That was one of the things he himself has said he wants to change. Now, he can't because it would take a constitutional amendment or a Supreme Court case. Doesn't mean he isn't going to want to try to do something. Maybe natural born citizen is code for white. Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is, at least on some level. He wants to deport all who don't have dark. Yeah. Yeah, the Alvin Bragg case, they did decide. Sounds like they're going to be pushing the sentencing date back. At least Alvin Bragg has agreed to push that back. I haven't heard the new date, um, and we'll see what happens. I just, I said before, I think if he was going to get sentenced, if it wasn't going to be jail time, it was going to be a fine, and some. Now that he won the presidency, it was going to be um, probably a fine or a suspended probation. If it was going to be any kind of jail time, that would probably also be suspended till after he's no longer president. I just don't think they're going to put him in prison now that he is the president elect. Because that would immediately go to the Supreme Court as to whether or not the state has the power to do that. And that would be a weird um, constitutional issue, and I have no idea how this Supreme Court would rule on it. Interestingly enough, though, remember how many times did he say with Hillary when they announced that investigation into her? Well, how could you run if you've been indicted? How could you run if you've been convicted? How could you run the country if you've been convicted of a crime? He was is under investigation. He's under indictment, and he has been convicted. Yet, doesn't apply when it's him. Yeah, he thinks the rules don't apply to him. That's why I was hoping Kamala was going to win all of his immunity from being a nominee and running for president was going to be over, and everything was going to come crashing down on him really rather fast. Um, Cohen got 3 years for the same crime. Yeah, he did. People feel like something is going to happen where he doesn't get in. I've been hearing that, but I haven't seen any evidence of that. I'm waiting till I see something concrete, a court case, an indictment, something factual, not just gut feelings and um, well, this thing could happen or maybe, or this far outcry, this wild theory over here. Well, if these three things happen, this happens. It does feel like the Twilight Zone. Anytime I'm expecting Rod Sterling to come in, you've entered a place beyond time and space. You've entered the Twilight Zone. Which reminds me, I need to rewatch that series. That's a great series. It still holds up, even 60 years later. You have an eerie feeling that this was the last time we got to exercise our right to vote? No, there's going to be midterms. Um, as I've been saying, they don't have the votes to change the Constitution. And the Constitution clearly says when these terms end. And if they don't hold an election, the incumbents just don't stay in office. There would have to be an election to replace them. We have held elections all the way through. Through every trial we faced, through the Great Depression, we held elections. Through World War II, we held elections. There have always been elections, and there will again. What about 14th Section 3? I just it's never been used. It seems like it would be self-executing. I just don't know. I just don't know how they implement it in a way that would prevent him from going in. And then the implication becomes what happens after that. You know? And the majority might of incumbent politicians might be on his side, but the problem is they still don't have the numbers. They still don't have the numbers. It's they don't have 2/3 of both houses of Congress to pass an amendment. They don't have 38 state houses and state legislatures to pass amendments. So they can't change the rules. They don't have enough. They may have the majority, but they don't have a supermajority. It's a slim majority at best. Like they may end up having a slimmer majority in the House of Representatives, especially after Matt Gaetz' resignation, Elise Stefanik getting pulled out for her position. Um, they may only have a 1 or 2 seat majority in the House. If they can't agree, they're not getting anything done, and they could barely agree this last time with a 5-seat majority. they're in trouble. And they got to at least be willing to throw Democrats something and make some of this bipartisan to get around the filibuster. Now, Jacqueline asks, are you the only one who finds it shocking that someone who can't get a security clearance can get elected? No, you're not. The problem is there are only 3 requirements to be president. Just 3. You must be 35 years old. You must be a natural-born U.S. citizen. And you have to have either served less than 2 terms or no more than 2 terms or no more than 1 term in 2 years of a previous president's term. That's it. Basically, you have to not be term limited by the 22nd Amendment. You have to be 35 and a natural-born U.S. citizen. Those are the only 3 requirements. Now, should there be more? Maybe. Could there be more in the future? Also, maybe. I have been thinking about it. Potentially, after Donald Trump is out of office in 2028, 2029 technically, after I'm assuming Democrats take power again. They have favorable majorities in Congress again. You could see some reforms to presidential power pushed through Congress. Some limits on who can run. There may be an amendment that says, you can't be a convicted felon. You can't be this, you can't be that. It wouldn't surprise me if at some point there is a 28th or a 29th amendment that has some of that added in there. Wendy says he won't sign the ethics contract. Exactly. And that ethics contract's all about how to handle classified information. Because he doesn't think he needs to. He doesn't think he needs to sign it. Because he wants to handle it however he wants. He thinks they're his personal property. Because that's how he was talking about it when they were seized by the DOJ the last time and returned to the federal government. Those were his property. He wants access to all of it again, or he's going to have access, and we'll see how he handles it. But it's probably going to be a deal where stuff's going to turn up missing again. Sure you did. Sure you did, Chad. Good job, TJ. Yeah, I don't. They're not worth dealing with. They're really not. All they do is do like they did to Rational Boomer last night, where he was on for half an hour and just kept getting mass reported because they didn't like his message. And now I haven't heard if he won his appeal or not, but he was saying he could be out for 10 days for going live. Trump's SCOTUS will be in effect for decades. Those amendments may never come to fruition. Problem is, SCOTUS has no play in constitutional amendments before they're passed. And once they're passed, they're on the Constitution. You can't rule an amendment as unconstitutional because it's an amendment. It's in the Constitution. Yeah, TJ, you're right. Mike is definitely right about blocking them. I block all of them. Even when I'm watching other people's lives or watching other videos and I'm in their comment section, I'll go in and I'll block them then too. I'll get them before they ever find my stuff. They're just a nuisance. I mean, certain creators like to leave them around, and they turn it into content, and I can see the value in that as a way of giving you more to talk about. But um, they make it hard, especially when they take your lives down. They mass report your videos. You're constantly having to appeal because you hurt their feelings. Just not worth it. How many times has Hawk had to make a new account? Yeah, I think he's on like 9 or something. TJ says, I don't know how Mishi does it. I don't either. But she makes great content. I love following her stuff. Those MAGA don't have anything else better to do than troll and then cry about it. Yeah, exactly. They they're some of the sorest winners I've ever seen. They win and they're mad they won. And I think I said it earlier, but I think they're in part mad because we're not acting like they do. We're not going crazy. We're not doing all that nonsense. We're talking real facts about what they can actually get done, what the limits are going to be, and what the next 4 years are going to look like. And they don't like it. They don't like the fact that we're not throwing a fit and having 60 court cases and on the airwaves nonstop talking about how it was stolen and rigged and everything. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. I thank everybody for taking the time to listen, for the gifts, the follows, etc. Um, Diane says we are watching and educating ourselves and moving on. Yeah, exactly. But I thank everybody for you know for listening. I thank TJ for being a great moderator. For those of you that caught part of the live and want to go back and catch all of it, I will be uploading it over on my YouTube page. I post all my lives up. Not sure when my next one's going to be. Um, Kind of just depends how I'm feeling that day, how the news is looking for the day. Um, but hopefully sometime between now and the weekend. Otherwise, maybe over the weekend. I don't know. I just kind of do it whenever I feel like it, really. Um, so, like I said, I appreciate everybody for jumping in. I'm going to go ahead and post this up over on my YouTube page. I am Analytical Iowan on YouTube. If you want to check out my lives, I post all of them over there. I have all my TikToks over there. And I do have a small section of what I call government answers videos, where I see people that are getting things wrong about how government or politics works, mostly how government works. And I try to explain away that confusion, usually in slightly longer videos than what I can post here on TikTok. So I do have some of those up as well. Um, and just wanted to throw that out there. So if anybody wanted to check that out, it's another option. Again, I appreciate everything and you guys taking the time to engage in the conversation. Hope you guys have a great night. All right, for those of you over on YouTube, after we got the connection issues fixed, we had a great live. Uh, and wrapping it up over there. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you the next time I go live.